Okay, and we are live with the 12th episode of Absolute AppSec. We're here live from LocoMoco Security Conference in Kona, Hawaii, joined by my co-host, Seth Law. Seth, say hi from Utah.
Yeah, rub it in a little bit more. I gotta go.
Sorry, man. Sorry.
I want to see that shot of the snow outside your window again.
Oh, actually, we're okay right now. But we are expecting snow again in like 2 days. So,
well,
yeah.
You know, actually, what's funny is when I get home on Sunday, it will be snowing. So, or it will have snowed on Saturday evening. So.
Oh, your life is so hard.
It is very tough, you know. I got a sunburn today from snorkeling, so
oh no,
you know, things are pretty much samesies between you and I.
Yeah, same.
So we're joined by Justin Collins, and I'm going to let Justin talk a little bit about himself, obviously, including we always ask our guests, like, how did you get into AppSec? So we'll get into that, but I mean, Seth and I have both known Justin for a while, but I think you and I met first in 2010. You were working at Twitter. I was working at Living Social. I brought you in for training.
Yep, that's true.
And because you were I remember like Googling static analysis for Ruby on Rails, and there was nothing. Like you know, everything was a $100,000 product for like C# or Java, right? But there was nothing that existed for Ruby on Rails. So then you have built this free Rails specific static analysis tool. So that was amazing. And obviously since then you've done a lot for the community. How many didn't you say? I think you had tweeted, or the Brakeman Pro or Brakeman Pro account had tweeted like there were 1 million downloads or something, or 100,000 or something like that.
10 million.
10 million
of Brakeman. You gotta take that with a little grain of salt, because the Ruby gem downloads, like even if you put up a gem that does nothing, you'll get like some downloads just because there are like bots and stuff that download gems. But
right.
Pretty exciting. Yeah, well, also it helps to be around for a while. Brakeman had its 7th birthday last year.
Happy birthday.
Yeah. 100th release last year. I tried to time 100th release 4.0 and the 7-year anniversary, and it didn't work out, but I tried.
Well, I mean, besides Brakeman and obviously Brakeman Pro, you've put together application security programs at Twitter, at currently Survey. I think for SurveyMonkey, you built some AppSec there.
Yeah, sure.
So you've worked.
I did not build the application security program at Twitter, just to be clear.
Oh, you did. I
didn't build that.
Well, okay,
I was part of it.
You were part of it, right?
I was there.
Yes, which is. And I'm shaking the camera, so my apologies. But deal with it, I guess. Sorry, it's free podcast. Like, yeah. So I know it's super professional of me to say. In fact, I will though. Let me see. I'll try to move this so that it doesn't.
Now we have Ken's hand. Ken's gonna show us.
Oh, we're getting ocean.
We're getting ocean?
Yeah, we see ocean on that one.
Just solved the contrast problem.
No. It's back down.
It went away. It's like, put your hand. If you just cover the camera, we're good to go.
And then you get ocean. There you go.
Okay. Well, it's fine.
We'll try to solve that as best as possible. But anyways, doing what we can. So we're gonna have some lasers and all kinds of.
This isn't live, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess besides all those things you've done, I mean, Justin's a PhD. He's done talks at CactusCon, RailsConf, RubyConf. I mean, a lot of like conferences.
I've not spoken at RubyConf, but it's okay.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. Fair enough.
I have done a lot of talks at RailsConf.
Yes.
Including in a couple weeks. I'm kind of shocked they're not sick of me yet. So
Clearly, I do a rigorous background check. I just figured you'd done.
you can see there are no notes.
Yeah, no notes
so.
whatsoever. Mostly just about to be somewhat drunk, sunburn ginger. So, so anyways, like that's. I mean, I could keep going on and on and on. I really could, but most humble PhD I've ever met. Great guy all around. So. The first thing we'll kind of start off with is your background and how you got into security.
My origin story.
Your origin story. So,
So I was doing my PhD. I was really into Ruby. Still very into Ruby. And at the time, I would like watch all the recorded conference talks and stuff. And one of the companies I would see is AT&T Interactive. Would come up as like a sponsor on these videos for the conferences. And I was looking for an internship. I was in LA. I was doing my PhD at UCLA. I was looking for an internship. I saw AT&T Interactive was in LA, had a bunch of internship positions open. So I applied to all of them. And the team that called me was the security team. Yeah.
Nice.
That's it, basically.
Security team called you, so you're now working security for them.
Yeah, basically. They're really great people. I did my internship there. Brakeman started there. I open sourced it at the end of my internship. I actually went back to work for them full time like a few months later. So that was like my first full-time security job was at AT&T Interactive / YP, Yellow Pages.
Yeah. During that weird transition.
Yeah, we had for half the year I worked for AT&T. It was real fun.
So yeah, that's got to be weird. Because anytime there's like a transition of brands, there's always some weirdness, like new policies, a little bit of.
Yeah, actually, I think that like right before I started working there is when they got the AT&T Interactive name or YP, and they are now YP again. You can go look at what happened to the company, and I just remember it was like all the divisions of AT&T must have AT&T in the name. So that was like basically where that came from.
Right.
So yeah, I started Brakeman as an internship project and then continued I was on the security team doing application security, and that started it all.
So the whole like building Brakeman, that was just like filling we got this.
You got some Jackson going on too.
Yeah.
Just some chairs moving around.
It's Hawaii. You can't stress it. You're not allowed to. State law.
Yeah, that's what I've been told.
State law.
I've been very careful not to break the law.
You don't want to break the law.
Trying very hard.
So when you built Brakeman, though, that was to fill effectively like a need, right?
It was. And in fact, I can, you were mentioning like you were looking for a tool actually a couple years. No, around like right after it had been released, really.
Really, yeah.
And basically what had happened was, I was new to security. I had actually, not knowing anything about this, I had actually proposed like, well, if you just had like a tool that like looks at the inputs to the program and the outputs and like you could find XSS.
So you weren't even familiar with?
No, I had no idea what I was doing. So, and the funny thing is like Brakeman still doesn't actually even work like that, but that was like the idea that I had.
The source to sync typical sort of AST.
Right. Like, which is not how Brakeman works, but that was my idea. It's like, yeah, you just like look at the inputs and the outputs and you could like tell like they're unescaped and it's XSS.
There's some like hundreds of million company, like.
So then what happened was, I started working there and I was like, yeah, I want to like build this tool. And, when I built it, the whole thing was like, I did look around. I'm like, okay, there's no commercial offer it, so we can't buy it.
I know, I tried nothing without your tool.
And basically my thought was, and I'm sure I even said this out loud, was, so I'll build this to fill the gap until someone comes out with one of these big companies will Ruby Rails support, and there will be no more need for Brakeman, essentially. And here we are, almost 8 years later.
Right.
And
there's only one company I know of that's tried.
So Checkmarx supports
Right.
Ruby and Rails, and Brakeman Pro.
Right.
So those are the only two that really have support for it.
Which, and I'm gonna say this on your behalf, so you don't have to say it, because this is not a sponsored. We can
no
say
money has exchanged hands.
No. I mean, and the point being that the idea about this podcast is it's supposed to be opinionated. So I'm just gonna give you an opinion. He's already laughing. No. So let me explain. Like, Checkmarx is a big bulky thing and I'm not putting it down, but what I'm saying is like a big heavyweight thing that runs and got to set it up on. I believe it runs on Windows and all that.
It's a C#.NET Windows server. Yep.
And this is from other people that I've talked to that have explained to me what it was like to go through this setup as well. So the difference or the benefit I see to Brakeman, besides the fact that it's like a really its analysis is great, but the fact that you can do like a gem install, if you're not doing the pro version, you're just doing the free version, you do gem install Brakeman, that's it. I mean,
yeah,
literally, like, it's installed, no issue, run it, and it's good to go. Which means, in terms of like the ability of a developer to get their hands on and run that tool efficiently, like triaging, yeah, maybe like that's different. But in terms of at least it getting in the pipeline, the CI pipeline, CD pipeline, developers being able to run it locally or wherever, that's a huge difference from then like running some heavyweight program that requires some very likely, and I don't know this for a fact, but likely some training on, because usually that's what those big company source code tools requires, on like how to get it to run I've not personally messed with it, so I don't know, but
I mean, so two things. One, yeah, Brakeman was designed on purpose because as an intern, I tried out some tools, just like security tools. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to like download a security tool and try to run it.
Right.
And it was like, I don't remember what it was. So no shaming.
Yeah.
But I downloaded a tool. I tried to run it, and it was like, you had to pass options to get it just to run. I'm like, I just want to see what it does. So like when I was writing Brakeman, I was like, you can run it with no options.
Yeah.
Like if you run it in the root of your Rails application, it will spit out a report.
It's literally the easiest security tool I've ever run.
And totally I was like, you don't have to type in any options. You don't even have to give it a path. Just type Brakeman and it will run.
Yeah.
And then, and I think, to be fair to the big static analysis companies, after that, you have to do everything yourself, right? Like, yeah, okay, I'll put it in my CI. Great, I have to figure out how to do that.
Right.
Okay, I want like reporting. I want like failing builds. I want like some place where people can look at you kind of have to do that yourself or find one of the many third-party providers.
Handle false positives. Like you have support for false positives. Brakeman has support for false positives, but you
very
definitely
contentious.
Oh yeah.
If Neil was here, he would let you know.
Yeah. Which, Neil, thanks a lot, man. No, he's busy.
Yeah, he's running this conference.
So
in Hawaii.
It's very tough location to work out of. So.
Well, we didn't know you were in Hawaii. You guys haven't mentioned that.
Haven't mentioned it? Well,
yeah. It's not like the ocean is right there. I mean,
exactly. We can't see it, right? For those of you that are listening only later, right? These guys happen to be in a bar. Okay.
And the look on Seth's face is not a nice one. So that I can paint a picture, he looks somewhat.
Yeah, exactly.
Curmudgeon. Just kidding.
Curmudgeonly. Oh, good. Yeah.
Okay, but going back to it, going back to your origin story. So you built the product, so here's the timeline. You decide to join AT&T security team, and then you make the first iteration of Brakeman, and that was what year? 2010?
That was 2010.
Okay.
Yep, summer of 2010. I pointed out in the Brakeman 7-year post, Rails 3.0 came out like the week after the first version of Brakeman was released. So it has like a lot of, like, it was built for Rails 2.3. It was built for, that's what almost everyone is using.
Right.
For those who are not familiar with Rails, there was a big, like, Rails 2.3 to Rails 3.0 was a very painful upgrade period for a lot of companies.
Unlike Rails 3 to 4 or Rails 4 to 5.
I've heard that those are easier.
Are they?
That's what I've heard.
I mean, I'd imagine it's improved.
There was a big, so as a security podcast, the big change from 2.3 to 3.0 was automatic escaping in templates for XSS prevention.
Oh, that's right. Because before it was like
you got to put a little H.
Yeah, you had to do the H or do the escape utils call
like CGI.
CGI, yeah.
Schema. Yep. So that was a big. That was one of the big changes.
I forgot about that. Yeah.
So that kind of sets the like vintage of Brakeman.
Been around for a while. It's so. But like, what's interesting is that AT&T allowed you to, or YP, they allowed you to continue to work on that. Basically, keep that software open to the public. To this day, it's still open to the public. There is again a professional version, but there is this OS. They allowed you to basically continue that and cultivate that and keep a community and keep iterating on it and building it.
Yeah, I mean the thing about it is I don't write Rails apps myself. Right. So for me, I ended the internship. I did a presentation, by the way, shout out to the LA Ruby meetup, which was really awesome to me and let me speak about Brakeman a couple times. And then like I went back to school and I'm like, what am I going to do with this thing? Like I have no interest in it. And then essentially there's like a very long story here, but I had to get a job, and AT&T called me and was like, we have a position open. Do you want it? I was like, okay. So,
because you also like not living on the streets and stuff. So
I like not living on the streets. It's typically a very bad idea to get a full-time job while doing a PhD.
Yes.
In fact, when I graduated, my advisor.
I say yes, like I know. It sounds right.
It is. When I graduated, my advisor was like, you did like the two things that like kill PhDs. You got a full-time job.
Yeah.
And you got married like while you were doing your PhD. And most of the time that just like stops the PhD. Right.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I'm persistent.
Yeah.
Basically, that's all it was. It was just like, no, I'm not quitting. Like
sheer kind of will and grit kind of.
I think I just don't like quitting things. And probably also part of the reason that Brakeman has continued, on top of, something that I think I've probably expressed before, but I think there's something weird when you have a free open source security tool.
Right.
Like you can have open source and you can like one day be like, you know what, I'm tired of this and I don't want to do this anymore. But there's something about when you say like, well, it's a security tool and people are using it and like relying on it.
Really using, like baking it into their, like the business itself. You know what I mean? Like relying on the results of Brakeman to literally determine if you're going to be Panera Bread and, be on the news.
I mean, hopefully it will help you avoid that.
Right. No, but, and, in the nature of like that, because since that just happened, the insecure direct object reference finding, Brakeman does say like, here's an unscoped lookup. I mean, it's not going to catch every, for sure. It's not going to catch.
You do have to turn on, that is an optional check for those curious. It's an optional check. If you use the pro version, it is on by default, but that is an optional check. It is a little bit noisy.
Right.
Warning about like, hey, you're not scoping a call to this model, but this model is owned by another model. Maybe you want to scope it.
And just real briefly to explain that, like, what he's saying is like, consider a model to be effectively a table in a database.
Yeah.
And so, like, let's say you've got a user model, and that's a user table in the database. So each user that goes in there has an ID, right? Like that's the primary key that increments every time a user goes in the database. So what Brakeman is doing is it's saying, like, if you're doing like user.find, which means, look in that table for a user and then provide me with the database, sequentially incrementing database ID, then like I'll return a user object, which obviously if you're doing
so there's no authorization happening there essentially.
Exactly. No authorization.
So yeah, that is one of the one of the warnings. Optional, you do have to turn it on because it is a little bit noisy. There are models that is like, no, there are plenty of situations where looking up something.
Well, like a coupon or something like,
there's plenty of
for plenty of use cases where that's fine.
Yeah. So yeah, there's something about like a security tool that you provide. At least for me, I feel like an obligation. Like if I stop working on this, there's a possibility that like the world becomes a little bit less secure. There's a possibility. And that makes me feel like, well, I gotta keep working on it.
It's not. I would say to make it. I think it's not just a possibility. I think it's definitely an inevitability because without support, the tool's not going to update as things change. And contrary to popular belief, Rails is still in use and Rails is still evolving and there's new versions coming out. So that stuff has to be maintained or it's not going to work anymore. And then people are going to
and people are going to get annoyed because things change and what used to be dangerous is not dangerous anymore. And that, that's a lot of times the input I get from the community, which is extremely helpful, is like, hey, like in Rails 5 something, this has changed and now this is a false positive. And I'm like, oh, okay. Like, I didn't know that. I didn't know.
Well, and to get to the heart of like the origin. So, Seth, I mean, we want your input on this. I mean, I do because so this week, origin story, the GitHub security team, we're all out meeting each other face to face. Some of us for the first time. So we did the origin story thing, and like what was interesting is we kind of everybody kind of happenstance or like fell into security, but there were indicators for every single one of us that like basically all pointed in that direction. Meaning like there was this story about one of the guy's his father put a BIOS password on the computer. So he learned to like, flip the BIOS battery so it would, flash and it would be removed. Right. And there was that, and every single one of us kind of had that, like taking things apart, figuring out how to get around systems, but like enjoying learning them in depth to get around them. And so I'm curious, Seth, Justin, you're kind of like, do you fall under that sort of, as a child or teenager or whatever, natural curiosity, wanting to get, circumvent things or just like,
Seth, you want to go first since we're co-located?
It's fine. Like, we've had some comments about how it's good to hear the two of you actually talk, Ruby and Rails security. So I'm not mad at all. I mean, obviously for me, I think I've talked about this a couple of times, or if you've heard any of my talks, I was doing stuff on, I was war dialing back in the day, right? All the way back before caller ID went into place, right? We knew about it because we were looking for other BBSs that might be up so that we could connect to them and play more games, right? That was kind of my first real introduction into security, or doing something like that. And I never thought it would be a job, right? And I think that's echoed by a lot of people. Most of us are like, hey, I never thought that I'd actually do this, right? But what about you, Justin? I mean, obviously, so what was your PhD in?
Yeah, so my PhD was not security. It was in what are called mobile ad hoc networks, or manets, or mayonnaise, as some people pronounce it. So it wasn't security related. I will say, when I went into doing my PhD, I wanted to do programming languages. And I remember the first advisor I had, which I only had for like a month because I switched, was like, programming language research is dead. Do something else. And I was like, okay. And my second advisor, actually, he didn't say it in those words, but he was basically like, oh, I'm not doing that anymore. But I took a bunch of classes I actually took a class on static analysis, some compilers and that kind of stuff. So when I went into making Brakeman, I did have some background there, but I didn't have the security stuff. In fact, I don't know if Tim Zaw is the guy who hired me at AT&T, and I don't know if he remembers, but I remember like the phone screening. He was like, okay, like look up, he probably said OWASP top 10, I'm not sure. But I definitely know he said like XSS and SQL injection. I was like, okay, I'll go look those up.
Yeah.
And I remember in the interview, maybe I remember this wrong, but I remember him saying like, yeah, you were the only one who like actually like went and looked it up before you came in for an interview. So like, I really didn't have the security background. I mean, I had a lot of programming experience, and I love programming. I wanted to do programming languages. I definitely had the like taking things apart, that kind of thing. But security was not, I mean, when I went to college, I was like, what major has programming in it?
Right.
And I'm like, okay, there's something called computer science. I guess I'll do that. Like, I really was not like aware of like the landscape, like the job landscape or the industry landscape.
No, there was no, I mean, back then there was no like industry.
Whoa, okay. Like,
well, I would say,
how old do you think I am? Because it wasn't that long ago.
No, I'm saying even as early as there. Okay, so there was an industry in 2010, but it wasn't. I mean, I don't feel like it was nearly what it is. Like DEF CON was still, even back then, like it was still big, but it wasn't. I mean, now like that whole. So there was Black Hat and DEF CON, I guess, and there was, but I don't know.
Well, but I mean, I wasn't even aware of like what the programming industry, like software industry, looked like.
So this is earlier, right?
Undergrad, yeah. So like, I had no idea, and I think it's tough. My wife gets really mad because, we'll go to like a dinner party and people are like, "So what do you do?" And I'm like, how do I explain what I do?
Yeah.
And my mom's like, "So what do you like do at your job, like on a day-to-day basis?" I'm like, I don't like. First of all, it's always different, right? In application security, like every day it's like something different. And I'm like, I don't know how to explain it. Like, I don't. So I think, to me it makes sense that it's confusing for people coming into it. Like, there's a lot of talk about like the security pipeline and like into security, and it seems like majors and different programs are popping up at universities.
There's definly degrees now for it.
It's starting to become more common,
mainstream.
But it's still like, I think people coming into it, it's still a very confusing world. It's so big, and people use like the same terms for different things,
right?
And
what's a penetration test, right?
Oh gosh, yeah.
I mean, pen test, right?
Pen test.
Most people will not even say penetration test. Yeah, I will be honest. I had no idea what people were talking about for like a couple years.
Tell somebody off the street what a pen test is.
They're like testing.
I don't even use a pen.
Like, what? Like
I have an iPad.
It's like the little paper at the store. Yeah, exactly.
How old are you? A pen? Yeah, no. But yeah, you're right. Even inside the industry, like pen test has. You're right. Like 4 or 5 different major sort of
like
variations.
Are they testing the application there?
Right.
Are they just testing the network? Are they just doing like red team kind of stuff? And again, like I feel like the application layer gets missed a lot.
Oh yeah.
With traditional pen tests.
Yeah, if it's just like here's an IP block and maybe even some domain names, like go at it, and then it's at that point it is from what. And I want to have Chris Gates in the podcast. In fact, all that's standing in the way of that is me sending a date. I mean, honestly, that's all it is. But anyways, they've brought up that like basically when they go and that happens for them, it's just, and this makes sense, right? It's just like what is going to get me through the door? I don't care like if it's a web app or if it's whatever. It's what is vulnerable the quickest so that I could then, because the hard stuff is like from how they explain it, it's like once you get past that. So really a web app to them, if I remote code execution, that'd be amazing. Can I get SQL? Can I get something that gets, and even SQL injection is like file inclusion would be potentially better, right? Like, so it just depends.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and I guess it's not really about the app, like the security of the application, right? It's just like how can I get into the systems themselves? Whereas this is an AppSec podcast,
right?
And I think what maybe I'm wrong. Honestly, you guys have like way more experience with this than I do, but the business is ending up caring about the application layer, right? It's like, do customers lose data? Is data leaked? You mentioned the Panera Bread thing, right? Like that has nothing to do with getting into a corporate network or something. That's just, hey, I can get all this information about your users
by changing a number in a URL.
Right. Classic. Yeah. Insecure direct object reference.
Classic.
Which, well,
it is devastating and takes no time at all. It's not like you're mapping the network and finding like firewall rules that are like esoteric but they're allowed. And then, it's none of that. It's just, well, I can change this number and then like I see somebody else's data. Okay. I don't even need to write a script. I can just do some like bash and, while whatever. And then
if you looked at the actual attack, it was even better than that because it was like if you changed the number to like the phone number, it was basically doing a search on the phone number. But if you included all zeros, it would basically match every number after that. So if you did like 950 and then a bunch of zeros, it would dump, thousands of records rather than, just a single record.
Oh, wow.
So it was.
You got to wonder what that code looks like.
It was insecure direct object reference on steroids, basically, right? Searchable. So, is the site even back up? Because it went down and then they kind of patched it, and then Krebs found more stuff and it's down again.
Due to our setup here, for those watching,
you can see our hands are nowhere near the keyboard.
So we can't. There's not a lot we can do here in terms of looking that up. But
I mean, their site's up, so I don't know what that means.
Did you read the art? Not to like totally, but whatever. We got time, and So, did you read like the whole Medium article by the person who submitted? Did you see that?
I didn't. I just read the first layer. I didn't read I saw something about the back and like back
and forth.
It was reported like a long time ago, and nothing
last August. Yep.
8 months.
8 months. Yeah.
And there were the initial response was like, as somebody who triages bug bounty reports for like my job, that was, I mean, you don't respond to somebody in such an aggressive, and let me explain for those who don't, for everybody out there, like the researcher was very polite, very nice, was a professional and sent out and the reason I bring that up, by the way, is you do get as a company, there's a certain amount of folks that are just like trying to, it's like the lawyer chasing the ambulance type deal where they'll say, oh, I've got this vulnerability, like let's, or like that kind of shit where they're trying to sell you something and they're not like, there's nothing to it. This, however, when you read it, it's like, again, I do that for a living, like triaging these, and that's a very clear, non-sales pitchy, like, I just want to send you this thing. I'm not even asking for anything in return. And then you can tell me if if you have any questions. That's it, right? And the response from Panera Bread was like something along the lines of, I don't like being, literally this is what it said, I don't like being duped, and I don't like sales pitchy, like, it was basically accusing this person before anything of trying to waste their time, do a sales pitch. It was a super aggressive, terrible response.
Almost like I didn't see the article, but was it like they skipped to like the signature line where it's like researcher at, some company?
That's what it seemed like. And the researcher, by the way, responded super, super nice. Again, like they were, so the response was something along the lines of, okay, I get it, but that's not, and this is like very well worded. Clearly somebody who's intelligent and articulate and thoughtful and is, not trying to, you can just read from like that alone.
He's doing it all the time, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So it's very obvious. So then, and by the way, there was no bounty program submitted through. There wasn't even a security at Panera Bread. This person had to go through this researcher had to go through a connection, I guess a friend of a friend or whatever, to then finally get to this person to even respond and get it so they've already been introed at this point by somebody else, but yet this is the response. So then they respond and they're like, hey, look, I'm not trying to do that. Just give me the PGP. If you want a PGP encrypted, send me that. Otherwise, I can just send it to you. And then if you have any questions, whatever, I'm not looking for anything. So then they're like, okay, cool. As you can imagine, we get a lot of the tone switch was, it's like, I don't know, it was like a bipolar type response.
They probably actually went back and read the email closely.
Yeah.
So at SurveyMonkey, we get quite a few of those, what we tend to get is hey, I found a vulnerability. Do you have a bug bounty? And just sort of, unsolicited, right?
Right. Yeah.
And I hope we always reply to them nicely, because the thing is you never know.
No,
you never know if they're gonna say you don't have extreme options, or if they're gonna say, hey, I found a huge hole.
Yeah.
A really big problem. Not that that's happened at SurveyMonkey, but you don't know what this person's going to report to you, and you also I think you should.
And to be fair about SurveyMonkey, that comment that can happen to anybody at any time, any company. To think that you're oh, we've got a great program, and yeah, sure, we've all got great. A lot of companies have great security programs. That doesn't mean that one day something can get slipped through, and then you don't have a huge vulnerability. Which is why it's so important.
So every time someone contacts, you have to assume that they're doing it in good faith and that they might have something real.
Right. And you're a steward for the company, essentially, right? You are the face of security for the company, and so even in just that capacity, forget it could be a really bad vulnerability.
This is the HackerOne pitch, right? There was some talk about this on Slack, right? It's if this is the pitch from HackerOne, right? Is if a company's being a jerk to you, hit the disclose button, right?
Oh, okay.
So the idea is that companies will be nicer to researchers if they know that one day their words may be public, right?
Oh, I see. Okay. I actually didn't read that or see that.
Well, this was a long time ago when we were talking to them. Maybe they don't sell themselves that way anymore, but
they still do responsible disclosure. I think that's why this.
I know they do that. Yeah.
Reached out to Krebs as well, because he's always offered that up, right? If somebody isn't listening to you, I'll do it for you, and I'll talk to him because of his name, and they'll actually listen to him. Where some companies don't listen to smaller researchers, they just don't.
Sure. And as we're kind of explaining, companies get a lot of these kind of emails, and you just can't tell what's legit or not. It sounds like in this case it probably sounded pretty legit, but there's always the people who are oh, I don't want to send you your thing yet. And sometimes you'll get the, how much will you pay me before they even tell you what it is, right?
That happens. I mean, there's
And
all sorts out there. Right?
And at the same time, it's like you can't discount those people.
No, you can't.
You have no idea. Even if their grammar is horrible and like it's terrible, you don't know. They might send you something legit.
Might. And grammar really, honestly, the only time it matters is like when you're like, oh, it can be frustrating when you're trying to extract something, but it's not you're right. It's not an indicator of whether or not the vulnerability or the thing that they found like is either legit or not. They're like totally mutually exclusive. So unless it's like, it looks like a bot, right? Like that's different, but
I suppose.
Yeah.
Even then you might as well respond.
Yeah, you might as well. So
well, I gotta get back to this Nigerian prince. He just emailed me. So.
Hey,
I got money coming.
PGP and that would be an interesting scam. Like
when a Nigerian prince contacts you, you
bug
know,
bounty. From Nigeria. Like, I have your vulnerability.
Send $100.
No, send 0.5 bitcoins. And
yeah. Oh yeah, now it's bitcoins, right? So look at me, I'm dating myself. Dollars? Who uses dollars?
Western Union. Yeah, send them all.
I bet you use a pen too. You know? Like,
send me a copy of your passport.
Yeah. So where were we? So yeah. So okay, we talked about Panera Bread. We gave the origin or the background story on that. But like, what was the point of that? Where were we going with that with Panera Bread?
I don't know, but I do want to mention bringing it back to like Rails and security.
Right.
Okay.
Like the default way that Rails does like RESTful routes for things is like IDOR, right? It's
yeah.
You know, user/1. Like that is the default for how it works.
Yes.
Out of the box. So like,
well, that's not just Rails, right? That's most, like if you look at Node or any of them, right? That's how they teach you to do it. Is hey, just use that key because you know it's going to be unique, and there's your restful endpoint.
Yep.
Like Django's the same way, right?
Yeah. Well, those all came after Rails, so I'm just saying.
Yeah.
They were all following Rails. So, okay, the hipster languages. All right, so let me go back to what was the C one? Axis? Was that the name of it? I guess those are XML. Those are SOAP endpoints. That doesn't count.
Seth used a fountain pen, so that's the difference.
I think I probably have one of those, but I can neither. Yeah.
For those who don't have video, that's a middle finger. No, kidding. From Seth.
Let's tie it back to Rails security a little bit more, right? I mean, as you dug into it, and as you're like building this, static analyzer, what were the challenges that you ran into when you were doing it? I mean, like the programmer in me wants to dig into like your whole like AST algorithm and how you're identifying vulnerabilities. I don't think we have time for that, but kind of give us the hits on what was difficult, how you when you were developing the tool, what were the main problems that you had and how did you solve them?
So it's funny, you mentioned CactusCon. I gave a talk there like, I don't know, a few years ago now. It goes so fast.
It was, I think 5 years ago, 2013.
I don't know. It seems like it was a long time ago. There was basically like my tips for like building something like Brakeman. And I've been pretty open with like how Brakeman works. It's probably not awesome, but one thing that ended up working really well is when I started working on it, remember my idea was like inputs, outputs, XSS. So the first, and it was like, okay, like how are templates rendered? How are they populated? And like working backwards from there, which by the way, if you're interested in building static analysis security tools for for web frameworks, that's my recommendation. start from like what you want to find and work backwards from that to build the tool. So, you know, going back to like 2010, at the time, the only game in town for like building an AST was Ruby Parser from Ryan Davis. I know nowadays there's another one just called Parser, which is not super easy to find. I mean, it is in Rubyland, but it's not a super distinct name, which is
kind of a generic,
supposedly better and so on. But Brakeman is very tied to the Ruby Parser AST that's generated and so on. So yeah, I mean, as far as challenges, you know, at the time it was like, okay, let me find like a parser that generates. This is going to sound crazy. So I need to be able to handle Ruby 1.8 and 1.9. Like that was like the big thing. For those who are not in Ruby land, that was a big jump from 1.8 to 1.9. A lot of people, it's not quite as bad as the Python 2.7 to 3.0, but it was like a rough time in Ruby land. And in Ruby 1.9, it actually included a like experimental AST generator. So like in Ruby 1.9 in the standard library, there's something called Ripper, which will generate an AST for you. But I was like, oh, but I got to handle Ruby 1.8 because we're using Ruby 1.8. So Ruby Parser it was. And then, you know, probably the biggest jump is that going from you're looking for, I want to find unescaped outputs in a template that gets rendered, right? Great. Rails is model view controller. So that means I got to go to look at where the values come from. Generally, they're coming from the controller. And basically pulling those values in from the controller to the template. And that's like the basis of Brakeman is basically copying values from one place to another. And the main one is from controllers to views, looking for XSS. And then it's applied in other places like local data flow analysis, and then some other places. And that's kind of the core of Brakeman. And it came from, I want to be able to find XSS. You know, so I don't know, the challenges at the beginning, which I hardly, now it's like hard to remember. I remember the 1.8, 1.9 thing. I remember like, again, like focus on Ruby or Rails 2.3, right? 2.3.11 actually, at the time.
Yeah. That was a while ago.
That was ages ago. It was ages ago. 8 years roughly ago. Yeah, so I think it was that. And then, you know, I think there's just been like a lot of things where I've just been like, well, Brakeman can't find that. You know, like I don't know how I would build a rule to find that. So it doesn't find things that I can't think of a way to find. You know, that's just kind of like the challenge of static analysis, I would say.
So give us an example of that.
Oh, sorry.
Give us an example.
I mean, we talked about IDOR. You know, it has very rough, you know, sort of heuristic for that. What's another good example?
Well, like because, and I want to point this out, you also built Rails-SQLi.org. Again, that's Rails-SQLi.org.
Yep.
And it's got Rails 3, 4, and 5 active record.
Yep.
So basically, there's Rails, the major versions, Rails 3, 4, and 5 over the last few years. Justin wrote this, and he basically documents all of the kind of the big unsafe. And I think you've made it clear, like, look, this is just like the stuff that from playing around, like, and I know about and have found, but like, this is probably not everything that's vulnerable in terms of SQL injection, but it's like the big stuff. It's pretty comprehensive.
Yeah, that basically came out of, I wanted to make sure Brakeman had coverage. So, and I was like, I guess I'll like make a spreadsheet or something.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I guess if I'm documenting all this, I might as well like put it on a website. Right. And actually you can download, you can like go to the GitHub repo and like pull it down and like play with it. It's really bad Rails apps. It basically dynamically generates all the queries like from a JSON file.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, man.
Yes, dynamically generates all the queries.
That's the magic foot gun of Ruby as well, in case nobody knows. So, but see, the thing that Justin did was he also, I mean, the reason you can play around with that code is he doesn't just show like, here's the vulnerable method, but he also gives you like the exploit string and then how that actually executes your input inside of like the active record kind of invocation of that.
Yeah, basically you can download it and run the app.
Right.
And when I put up the website, I basically like just generate, I run the Rails app and then I do a wget and pull like
it's
the page and then I put that up.
Ruby.
I think I'd GitHub. I don't know.
Yeah. Ruby, ladies and gentlemen. Like if you ever hear anybody use the term foot gun with Ruby, there's a reason. It's because you can do some crazy shit on the fly. In fact, if anybody just again, I don't know who knows what about Ruby on who's listening. It is hilarious, but the reason that it's possible is that effectively you can in Ruby more easily, I'd say, than even languages that have like runtime injection. You can define methods and classes. Everything's an object. That's the whole idea. Everything's an object.
It's
to be defined
extremely
at runtime.
flexible language, right, with a lot of, like you said, define methods at runtime, define classes at runtime. I mean, and if you ever look at the internals of Rails, they do this all over the place. Like so much of Rails is actually strings that get evaluated when you run Rails. And this part of magic, though, like all these dynamic methods, talking about like active record where you can be like find by this and this and this like as the method name, and that has to be dynamic, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So there's a lot of that power in Ruby, and Rails takes advantage of a lot of that. And that site that I threw up also kind of does as well.
I mean, it's a perfect example of, and the way I've explained it is your application's building itself while it's running based off of various factors and like what's being,
sure.
Like it could be like based on input, or it could be based on just like different, like you said, strings that depending on what happens, the different string gets turned from a string type into a class or
for sure,
whatever.
I mean, this is what Rails does for you. This is, especially active record, which is the ORM for Rail that comes with Rails, is just like, and this is what people hate about Rails too, is like, it's so magical. Like, and I know some people have gotten upset about the use of the term magic with programming. Of course, it's not really magic, but the implicit stuff that it does is both like, it's like the blessing and the curse. Because it's amazing interface when you're using it. You're just like, oh my gosh, I can just like you can bust out a Rails app in no time.
Oh yeah, it's a pain to use most everything else in comparison. Yeah.
But
for those of us that are familiar with it,
But then it's like super slow to do all that kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
And it's like, wait, how, like you're coming into it and like try to figure out what's going on in a Rails app sometimes is like, you don't know, because there might be like like a gem somewhere that's just like changing everything. And,
the level of abstraction is basically the magic, essentially.
Sure. I think the one that, this was like early Rails that people started like falling in love with was like doing like $1.day.ago, like for like date manipulation,
right,
where they are patching the number class with dynamic methods to like generate dates, right? Which is amazing user interface and like so crazy from a programming perspective.
Oh yeah, from like, hey, we're gonna here's an integer class, or was it number integer, whatever. Like
it's changed over time.
Yeah, like but
for the Ruby aficionados out there.
For those that are in the know,
Rails 2, whatever, it changed to like a different unified class and whatever.
But it's neither here nor there. Now like calling .day or whatever,
which is added by Rails, by Action Pack or whatever, as a feature of the web programming framework. You're getting this really nice date generation But it
comes at a cost, that abstraction, especially. Okay, and so like tying it back to Brakeman, this is the kind of the beauty of it, because, and probably as part of, I have to imagine the more users you got over time, the more difficult this has been to maintain, and your challenges that were in the early versions have to look very different from the more recent challenges.
Sure. I mean, I think, back to Seth's question, immediately what people ask is like, well, what do you do about eval? Like, what if I call it? I'm like, well, then like, it's not going to work, And there's like a major disclaimer for Brakeman, which is if you're building a Rails app that doesn't look like a normal Rails app, it's probably not going to work well.
Right.
Like, that's just how it is. Something that I'm surprised hasn't come up yet is the Rails motto of convention over configuration, which essentially is what enables Brakeman to work on such a dynamic language, is that Rails just has a way of doing things, and people tend to follow that way, and you can make assumptions about how an application works because of that. Like, oh, these are controllers. Why? Because they're in app/controllers,
right? And
the class name has controller in it.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, even Django and MVC, well, it's I think backwards, or is it? I mean, it's essentially it's an MVC, but I think that like it might be like a template or I don't know, whatever.
Yeah, anyways, their views are really controllers, and then they use templates as views, but it's essentially an MVC. Yeah.
Yeah, views are controller. Yeah, views.py is your controller and actions, whatever. It's weird, but the structure can be pretty much whatever you want. Yeah, you have to configure it in like settings.py. Like you have to put the root of how it all gets kicked off from the structure. But essentially, it is configurable. Whereas, which I would have to assume that's why Brakeman can both handle, like you said. Well, yeah, I mean you've said it and you built it, so I believe you. But that it can work so well. It's why, and I think this has been an interesting choice, because I know I've hounded you over the years to build, and I still troll you, at least like
you're not the only one.
You get trolled so hard about like, oh, well, like there's no Go tool or there's no Node tool that's, so just build it. But
which, by the way, is why I made that talk, which you can go look up from CactusCon, that talks about how I did it.
We want you to build it, Justin. Yeah. No, but like those, I mean,
it's a lot of work though.
You've stayed on top of one thing and one thing only, and it is, like you said, it's a framework that follows a very explicit convention. So it is. I mean, I'm not even going to say it's easy. There's challenges for sure,
but it's an advantage that way,
right?
And that you can make assumptions
I'm saying
about.
Right to the guy who,
Well, sure, but Rails. I mean, like, if you compare it to like, even if you compare it to like Sinatra, and yes, I've thought about Sinatra support actually quite a bit. Maybe one day it will happen.
Do people, just real quick, do what some of us have tried to do and like shove?
Yes.
Yeah. What I'm going to say is shove some bits of code that are basically controllers and actions into folder structures to trick I've done it. It doesn't work very well, but I've done it. Try to trick Brakeman into. I mean, it works well enough given. It's not a fault of Brakeman. It's like trying to use the wrong thing. It's like using a wrench when you need a hammer. So there's that. But yes.
So and there was. For how long ago? But Neil Matatal, a while back, one of your previous guests, you can go look up.
Who again failed to show up today. Thanks, Neil.
Because he's actually putting on this conference.
So whatever. Yeah.
So he added the force option,
right?
Which is what I'm like. Look, you can use this and try to make Brakeman work on. Whatever it is you're trying to get it to work on, and there are no guarantees and no warranties, and I'm not going to support you. Actually, this might be an interesting thing for you guys to answer. Is like people are like, I want to just like give Brakeman like a gem that it like scans, and I'm like, well, what vulnerability would it find? If you're scanning a web framework or a web application, you're looking for web vulnerabilities.
Right.
If I'm going to scan a random .rb file,
Right.
like what do people expect to find?
Well, okay, so, and I'll tell you what they expect to find. Like anything to like Sol, that might be weird. Anytime that you see like a, like SSL being turned off for whatever reason, like, and because why I say that is it might be like some suspect call out to, some way. Because when you install, like one of the main issues with back, you remember back when people were, exploiting the Ruby ecosystem, or at least like trying to get coverage for exploiting the Ruby ecosystem,
Sure.
putting in those vulnerable gems, I shouldn't say vulnerable. I should say
proofs of concept.
Malware. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Proof of concept.
Malicious,
Yeah. So, I mean, they were basically calling out to their own servers, if I remember correctly. So that's suspect. But even like file, well, I mean, you can't really, because lots of stuff works.
Like
with
where
files.
Even so I will say like Brakeman would find that stuff if you just pointed it like at a random file.
Right.
The two things that you mentioned, turning off SSL and like I would say unsafely making system calls. But the thing is like maybe that's the whole point of a program is to make system calls.
Yeah.
And like, again, to answer Seth's question twice, one of the things that's hard about static analysis is knowing like, is this value dangerous or not? Now in Rails, and what Brakeman does is like, hey, params is almost always query parameters. That's a Rails standard. So params is probably dangerous.
Right.
Cookies is probably dangerous. Session might be dangerous. And then things that look like they came from the database, something flying at me. Those might be dangerous. But if you say scan a library, how do you know what's dangerous? Like that's a hard thing. Like I don't know how you would know. And that's why I don't support that, because support it in the sense of like, this is Brakeman.
Yeah, I mean, and that's where those big, static analyzers, right? The static analysis tools like Fortify or AppScan, Source. That's where they supposedly make their money, is in the, hey, this is taint analysis, right?
Sure.
But you see the number of false positives that come out of that, and I don't necessarily think that buys them that much, because of the amount of manual labor that it takes to actually go and trace that stuff down, right?
I do wonder about that, and I think Neil mentioned this too. Neil and I work together at Twitter, which is where like a lot of this is coming. Me talking about Neil, also work on Brakeman Pro together, and so on. So that's why I'm talking about Neil. But man, now I forgot what I was going to say.
Well, no, and actually, while you're collecting your thoughts, I was going to add like,
I do remember.
Okay, well then just go.
Okay, yeah.
Don't forget.
So the idea of like something to set this up a little bit. I tweeted this out like a long time ago, but like the hard part about building a static analysis security tool is not finding vulnerabilities. It's not finding false positives, right? Like no one cares if you can find vulnerabilities, but it's buried in a bunch of false positives. So most of the work is actually avoiding false positives. And maybe to your point, Seth, is like, I don't know personally, but maybe the effort of building these custom rules with taint analysis and so on is actually more work than just like simple grep to find the string that's suspicious and then validate it manually. Maybe that's actually a better use of time than building. I don't know, because I haven't worked on these big tools.
I don't know. Maybe we can get some of the Codascope or the Synopsys guys, or I don't know. It'd be an interesting discussion with some of those guys that actually work low level on vulnerability identification. I mean, I know how we do it from a manual perspective, and you would think that the tool would be attempting something similar, right?
It's so something that comes up sometimes with Brakeman is that people either think it's like way smarter than it actually is, or than it actually is. And some of that smarter is like, when you think about, you're trying to get a program to do what you just said. You're trying to get a program to look at another program and look at it like a human would.
Yep.
and understand it like a human would. And that's actually like really, really difficult to do, which is
So
the
to
difficulty.
follow on that, when are you going to add AI to Brakeman? Is that, the only way that you can do it?
I don't know how you would do that. It's an interesting idea. I mean, if I were to do something like that, it would definitely be like, I don't know, feed in a bunch of Rails apps, throw it at some machine learning. I don't know. I'm sure someone's working on that problem.
Yeah.
But I bet a lot of it comes back down to like find a suspicious looking bit of code and like,
grep. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, starting with like grep, and then you do like what some people call like semantic grep, which is working with an AST, but you're still just like, okay, find me a method call that looks like this, or find me code that looks like this, but at least it like won't match a comment.
Yeah.
Right. Or some,
like, and it has some context.
Right. It has some what the semantics of the program in terms of like, this is a method call, but it doesn't understand like, is this dangerous? Where'd this value come from? That kind of information. Honestly, when I think about it, if you don't have a commercial or open source tool for your language or framework, all you want is visibility into the code that's getting shipped. And a very simple way to do that is to have something that has rules for grep that just look for things that are suspicious in your code base, right?
Right.
And that's like a perfectly reasonable thing that gets you, I think it gets you way farther down the road than people think it will.
Yeah, and again, the reason we talked about, I'm going to reiterate it for Justin. This isn't somebody, like, think about what's being said, because you're not talking about somebody who like never built, who's basically like, oh, I don't know much, but I'm sure grep is fine. Like I know Justin, very smart guy. Again, he's been working in static analysis for a long time. So, like I value that opinion more than I would most people. So for what it's worth.
If you have it available, you might as well use a tool.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, you talk about like the linters as well, right? And I've always said that, security testing is really just glorified QA testing. If you know an app, you can definitely tease a lot of this out using those QA tests. You can, right?
Yeah. I mean, it really depends on like how you set it up, right? And really, really depends on the culture of your company. That is like the biggest thing, is like, what is the development culture at your company? When Neil and I were at Twitter, we were like too scared to get like in the way of deployment. Like we were just too scared. Or at least I was. I think the team in general, we were too worried about false positives preventing code from shipping. And then I would talk to other people and they're like, oh yeah, we threw it right in Jenkins, fails if there's any warnings. And I'm like, whoa, there's false positives, right? And they're like, no, it's fine. Like,
yeah.
Like it's, if your culture is cool with that and people are cool with like, yeah, there's some false positives. I mean,
I've been one of those people who was fine, like looking for with a certain level, because you can pass in, like, you could say like, here's a level of confidence.
Sure.
If it hits the high confidence, so it's fairly confident that whatever it's looking at is actually a vulnerability. And then like specific checks like SQLi, XSS, command and injection. I would never do like unscoped find or anything like that. I mean that, right. But like for those big ones, and again, I guess it depends on your culture. It depends on your business model.
There's, speaking of being like old, like I think that there's just a mindset at a lot of companies and for a lot of developers now where it's like, okay, like I hook it up to like Code Climate, and I hook it up to Pylint, and I hook it up to the Node one, JS Lint, and like I just deal with it. And I'm used to getting automated feedback from the machine, from the CI process, and I'm just used to it.
Right.
And that's part of our process, and I'm not worried about it. So if I can throw a security tool in there, yeah, why not? And I think it's when you're trying to introduce it at an established company that you have to be more careful about it, and then you end up building something where you're not in the way of code going out. But it's really, really culture dependent.
It is.
Whether you can set that tool in line with deployment or not.
But the thing with Brakeman is that it is so easy for developers. It is essentially a security lint tool, like you're saying. So because it's not hard to install, it's not hard to get up and running. It feels and behaves just like anything else. Now, like, again, maybe not always, maybe not every developer is like looking at it and saying like, oh, I totally know whether or not I'm vulnerable. But honestly, most developers can figure out if, like, you're saying like, I don't know, you're calling raw or whatever on like this thing, like it's not hard to Google and someone be like, holy shit, that's bad. Like, stop doing that. Here's a better alternative. So it feels natural. It is essentially a security linting tool, and easy for developers to get going. So what are the contrasts between Brakeman and Brakeman Pro? Yeah, I know this is, I'm curious what in your own words,
Sure. I mean, of course, like the most obvious thing is that we have like a desktop GUI that you can like run and manage your vulnerabilities in that GUI. And, we've gotten good feedback on it in terms of just enabling people to go through those results. I mentioned it earlier, right? Like, Brakeman is great at the, like, yeah, you can run it right away. It's easy to throw in your pipeline, etc. And then you start wishing you had the, like, management and, like, false positive management and this and that. So Brakeman Pro, there is, like, a desktop app for it, which is pretty cool, I think.
I do too. I've used it. I use it. So
thanks.
Yeah.
There's also there's of course there are like a few more rules that aren't in the open source one. They tend to be noisier, or else like they introduce some overhead. We were mentioning briefly like data flow analysis. There is more data flow analysis in the Pro version, so the Pro version is interesting. So I've learned a lot about like the world of commercial static analysis and security tools in general, and how it is that people sell them and how companies want you. So like the question I usually get is like, does it find more vulnerabilities? And I'm like, well, it may find more vulnerabilities.
Right.
It may also find fewer because because of more data flow analysis, it will actually cut out some false positives. So like if you look at like absolute number of findings, it may go down, but they'll probably be better quality. Or they might go up and be more false positives because the Pro version does report a lot more. One example is like in the open source version, it will only report an XSS when it knows that it's probably a dangerous value. Whereas the Pro version will tell you about everywhere you're outputting something without escaping, whether it looks dangerous or not. And those are info level warnings that you can ignore if you want. So that's another big difference. We also have something that I think is kind of cool. You can like run the Pro engine in like your C, and it will output like a zip file, and then you can open that in the desktop app. That's kind of cool. We do have some support for custom rules, things like that. We have Excel output from the desktop app. So if you want to export to Excel, speaking of like Ruby and the Ruby ecosystem, and one of the things that's like amazing about it, there's like several gems for writing, like generating Excel files. And I picked up one. I don't remember exactly which one. It's like XLS X Writer or something.
Right.
It's awesome. some things and like graphs and stuff. And I'm like, it was like really easy to add that to the product, which was amazing.
Yeah, Ruby ecosystems. I mean, you can.
I love Ruby.
And you can create PDFs with Prawn.
Yeah, so we have also PDF output with Prawn. You also get like commercial support from yours truly with the Pro version.
Pager. You have a pager that you answer support calls. I'm gonna start
Jim
right now.
Yeah.
I'm like, Justin, I miss you. He's like, do you have a question? No.
Oh, no. Wait, can you call me? This is priority 1. Yeah.
Priority 1.
I'm trying to think. Shoot, there's like some other Pro feature that is like actually pretty cool that now is like escaping me, which is why I'm not a good sales or business person. Remember, when you asked me, will it find more vulnerabilities? I can't answer you in a straightforward way.
Well, you can do it in an honest way, though, which is more than,
Yeah.
And I just want to be clear,
try.
like, I like talking about what you're doing because, well, it's been so useful to me in my career. Like, honestly, I wouldn't have had coverage the same way. No, nowhere near the same way. So but I use it and I believe in it. That having been said, like, this is like Seth and I's podcast. Like, this is not sponsored. I never really plan on it. This is for us to say like so when I say that I like the products that you build, man, I'm saying it because I use it and I fucking love it, and not because someone's telling me. So
we don't have it's not a SaaS, by the way. A lot of people are like, so you're building a SaaS, I can like hook it up to. No, we do have a partnership with CodeClimate that I mentioned. Like, you can get Brakeman Pro running on CodeClimate, which is up in the cloud and hooks into your GitHub and all that stuff. You can also just use the open source version on GitHub or on CodeClimate as well. Pro version, you get this stuff and you get like nice little descriptions with like more information about the warnings. But yeah, I'm not a business guy. Like, it's really, really obvious if you look at our business, Brakeman Pro. Really, it was just like I wanted to be able to justify spending time on some of the things that just take more time, like building a desktop app. Actually, Neil did almost all that. So,
and you did in JRuby, and that is a pain in the ass.
Yeah, JRuby FX, which is Java FX on JRuby. I know we got a shout out, our UX guy, Adam. He like it looks really nice. We got to go back and find the screenshots of what it looked like before he like skinned the whole thing, and it was like default widgets and all this stuff because it was so ugly. It was before we released it, so no one really has seen it.
Was this back when I first saw it? I don't remember what it looked like when I first saw it.
You may have seen it before we got it looking, I think you guys were sleek and black. And
yeah, because I think you guys were like, we built this thing. Like, yeah.
Yeah. If you're ever building anything, hire someone to do the UI and UX for you. Like, that's my advice.
Well, and like, at least you guys did choose FX because Swing is such shit. And I know because I built a JRuby Swing, but like even just Swing in general, it's like in terms of modern day, like I think you guys went the right direction with FX.
Yeah, so before Neil and actually Jim Manico jumped in on Brakeman Pro stuff,
and he's one of the co-organizers.
Also a co-organizer of this conference.
I think it's Dave Lewis.
It's a very small world.
Oh yeah, I think it's Dave Lewis, Gattaca, Jim Manico, and Neil. I want to say.
I thought Jeremiah Grossman was also.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I'm forgetting people.
Yeah, the island people are organizing the conference. Yeah, so now I forget entirely. Oh yeah, Java FX is like, oh yeah, so like I had basically gone through and again I love Ruby and like I'm most productive in Ruby, so I'm like, okay, like what Ruby GUI toolkit, cross-platform, somewhat modern, like blah 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 blah, and like basically it came down to, and hopefully no one gets mad about this, but like JRubyFX was like the only thing that like, you know, like where are you gonna use like Tickle, like TK Tickle?
Never heard of that.
Like it's a pain.
Is
There's
that like Cuddle Comfort?
there's like Fox or FX Fox lib something, huge pain. There's shoes, but that's not made to be used as like really like a commercial like product, and also has ended up splitting into like multiple things to get operating system. Anyways, this is like total like Ruby land discussion, but
well,
really it came down to like, if you can stomach using the JVM, use JRuby, use JRubyFX. It makes using JavaFX even cooler and easier.
right.
Like the way it wraps stuff is like, again, quite magical.
Yeah.
But pretty cool. Like, again, Neil did most of the work on it, but I've been able to go in and do stuff. And I'm like, oh, that was like really easy. Like,
yeah.
Okay, like I need a menu. Oh, okay, like that was really easy. Like it's a total shout out to them on the work on JRuby, on JRubyFX, and then JavaFX is pretty sweet. I hope that Oracle continues to support it.
Oh yeah, it's definitely better than Swing, and I don't know about the Cuddle Comfort or Tickle, whatever. But you know, FX is not a bad choice. And as a user, the interface is nice. So I feel like that's worth it. What's that, Seth?
Oh, I was just gonna say, you know, we're looking at about an hour and a half now. So.
Oh wow! Dang.
Sorry, I talk a lot.
We've been going for a while.
You're here. Started and I go.
That's why you're here. So
yeah. No. I mean, it's great, right? So, but you know, we'll just try and cut it off here. I just wanted some final thoughts from, you know, you, Justin, on, you know, advice to people like either getting into security or, you know, coding up a security tool. How would you recommend somebody go about doing that?
Yeah, well, go watch my CactusCon talk. It's on YouTube. And I hope this is not too self-promotional, but like a couple of weeks ago, I went through and on my personal website, which no one has brought up that my handle is President Beef, but presidentbeef.com. I have all the talks I think I've ever given with like links to the videos and slides. So you can go there and like go to the CactusCon talk, and I talk about like what I think makes Brakeman special, and how to do it. This is like, oh man. So when I was working at AT&T, Brakeman went out. Tenzah, who was very involved in like OWASP and stuff in LA, he was like, hey, we should like submit a talk to AppSec USA. And I was like, yeah, whatever. And he submitted the talk.
That's mostly your response. Yeah, whatever. Like for everything.
Like, okay.
Yeah, okay.
I had no idea. I'm like, a talk? I don't know how to do that. Like, yeah, if you want to do it. So we went and we gave this talk, and Brian Chess from what was his company? His product. He wrote the book on static analysis security, like how to do static analysis for security. So he literally wrote the book on it. And he had like a super nice comment that he wrote up on a blog post, which was basically like, we didn't worry about like the theoretical side of static analysis. Like I said earlier, it was like, start with the problem and work backwards to like figure out how to get the thing to do that, to find that issue. Most static analysis starts from, okay, like we're going to build an AST, we're going to do these cool things on it, we're going to open up like our compiler's book and like figure out how to do this and that and data flow analysis and like build these basic blocks and
it's not building to solve us one specific problem and iterating.
Exactly, which is what, I mean, that's really how software development works anyway.
Yeah, it should.
That's what I found has worked.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, start with the problem that you want to solve and work backwards from there in terms of building security tools. In terms of getting into security, I don't know if I have like really good advice since I got into it super accidentally. I would say it's a huge, huge field, and there's probably some in security that other kinds. I mean, it's such a huge field that, and everyone says this, but it changes all the time. Things are evolving. There's new stuff. Everyone's talking about cryptocurrencies.
Yeah.
I've completely steered clear of those, so please don't ask me about them.
You don't have any blockchain advice for us?
No blockchain advice. There's a guy doing a series on how to build a blockchain in Ruby. You can go look it up.
I will actually, but yeah. Anyways.
So if you're interested in security, I don't know. Probably the best thing is like attend a meetup. Like go to like an OWASP meetup. They're all over the place. They're free. Go to an OWASP meetup. Chat to people. If you can go to like a B-Sides conference, which are almost always free or extremely cheap, like $20, $30.
They're not much.
Go to those. There's probably one near you. And start looking at what people are doing in security and see if it's something interests you. And honestly, like security job market, I think we're all well aware is like so hot right now. So hot.
It's good. But as a reminder to those who may be young and new to the or whatever, maybe not young, but just new to the field, like on that point, yes, it's a big field. Yes, there's a lot of jobs, but the community is small. So fair warning, don't be an asshole. Like, because like, people matter. You're talking about
Panera Bread guy's name is like out there, and we just talked about what a jerk he is, and I haven't even read the email.
Yeah, now Justin's all fired up, Thanks. No, but because you're talking about meetups, you're talking about conference, and that's ultimately what it comes down to, like the connections. Like we've known each other because of similar, we were going through similar Rails security catastrophes of 2011, 12, 13.
All the connections I have. My coworker Carla, I'm gonna give her a shout out. She's always like, oh, like everyone knows you, and like I'm like, no, like what happens is I built a tool that a bunch of people use. Then I went to conferences and I stood up in front of people and talked about it. They saw me. They talk to me, and now like I know people. If I see them enough times, I'll remember them, and then I know them. Like that's
you're explaining basic social. You're deconstructing basic social order, but
what I'm saying is like.
So you talk to people a couple of times, and then you know them.
No.
We got it.
In particular, getting up in front of people and talking about something, you're going to make connections. Putting tools out. If you can put out tools that are useful to people, you're gonna get like people are gonna use them, and you can promote them. You can go and talk. I guess I didn't mention like build an open source security tool that people use. That's like a most amazing way into security.
Oh, absolutely.
You're doing something that helps people. People love you because love is maybe a strong term, but like you get like a lot of.
Usually people aren't mad at you for giving free code away.
Yeah, there you go.
Even if it's not great.
False positives aside.
I'm saying like even if somebody who's like, I'm just doing this to like learn. Yeah. Still, you're not like, unless you're doing like, there was some to the auto exploit thing. There was a little bit of, but whatever. Like,
be careful, but
be careful.
I think I'll definitely see the realm of open source security tools is not saturated and is not. There are some projects like Metasploit, probably super mature. Brakeman kind of mature. What else? I'm sure there are mature ones out there, but if you have a desire to get into it and build things, no one has built a Brakeman for Django. No one has built a Brakeman for Node. No one is. I guess there's kind of a PHP one, but like, even though people have approached me about these things and there's been interest and people said like, yeah, I'm kind of working on this or that. It's a hard problem, and it's a fun problem. So tackle those problems.
A good one would be Elixir and the Phoenix framework.
So Phoenix has one.
Oh, does it?
Yeah, there's one for Phoenix. I'm sorry, I don't remember the name, but there is one for Phoenix that people seem to like.
I'm gonna have to check that out.
Yeah, definitely check it out. The thing that I can't remember the name of.
Yeah.
We'll look that up.
I did want to thank you.
Yeah.
I did want to thank you because we had mentioned on this podcast a couple of times. We're trying to promote, speaking of the whole thing is like with this podcast. We want to talk about our opinions, obviously. Hope that helps. But we also want to give information to folks who maybe don't know much about the field, or they're just into it, or whatever. And then also, like, another kind of thing is to promote a little bit of diversity and inclusion, and try to get, basically, like, I think both Seth and I are of the opinion that the more differing types of opinions that can come into this field, the more we all grow, the better it is for us.
Yeah.
So you did something which I really loved, which was sponsor this conference. And so thank you. Well, that's the diversity piece to that. And I just wanted to thank you.
So I think there are a few different sponsors for the conference. Neil was like paying out of his like airline miles for people to promote diversity at the conference, for people to come to the conference. And I was like, we can pay for, like, Brakeman Pro could pay for a couple of those. And we and a couple other companies paid for some of the diversity scholarships, I guess, for people to come to the conference. And, awesome for the conference and for Neil for doing that. For us, I mean, for Brakeman Pro, it was kind of no-brainer to support the conference and, of course, diversity. I think
our battery's about to die.
Battery's
by the way,
gonna die.
Yeah. So
but let me just say that what you said is like should be really a basic tenet of security.
Right.
Like, people coming in with different viewpoints is how you break things.
Yeah.
Right.
That's exactly the point.
Like, if everyone thought like, happy path, I'm building this tool and no one's ever going to do anything mean to it, then you wouldn't have security.
No.
So it's kind of a no-brainer that we would want, in any field, and especially in security, all kinds of people.
Yes,
from all kinds of backgrounds.
From the different background, different backgrounds, different opinions. That's the only way we grow. Cool. Seth, our battery's about to die here, so if we stop broadcasting, anything you want to put out there before we stop the broadcast?
No, just join us next week. I think we'll be back to our regular time. If somebody can make it back from Hawaii in one piece, that is.
We'll see.
But thanks to Justin, right, and you guys for hanging out while you're on at a conference in Hawaii.
Work. This is hard work.
Working in Hawaii.
Yep.
And we'll chat soon. So thanks everybody for joining.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thanks everyone. Thanks again, Justin. Really appreciate it. All right. Have a good night. Bye.